Hilchas Schirus Perik Shnei Moser. Now the din is that when a person is doing work with something that's gedula min hakarka, as we'll soon learn, so there's in certain situations that there's a heter that he's allowed to eat from the item that he's doing work in. Now that din applies side to something which is mechuber, side to something that's tolush, but it's different. When a person is doing work in something that's tolush, so then he can eat while he's doing the work. He's allowed to eat while he's doing the work. And fakert, when he finishes doing the work, then he's not allowed to eat. Masha'enka, when a person is doing work in something that's mechuber lekarka, so while he's doing the work, he's detaching it from the ground, so then he's not allowed to take for himself. Masha'enka, when he finishes a certain stage of that work, as we'll learn b'hemshech, so at that point in time, that's when the Torah was mater, when he finished the work for the balabayas, he's allowed to do something and take something for himself. That's this din. Now this is also b'tanai, that the item that he's eating is not something which is nigmar malachti. If something that's already nigmar malachti, so it's mechuyev b'trumas u'maisos, so in those cases it doesn't apply this din of the heter achila. Nachamal. Hapelin shein oisen bedavar shegidul perik shnei moser. Hapelin shein oisen bedavar shegidul b'noretz. Pelim that are working on something which grows from the ground. V'adayin le nigmar malachti, but this item is not yet nigmar malachti. It's davar shegidul b'noretz, but it's not yet nigmar malachti. And that's bein betolish, bein b'mechuber. He's working either in tolish and mechuber. And v'yiu maseim, there is another tonight. V'yiu maseim gemiras malacha. Through what he's doing, that's going to be the gemar hamalacha. So ala arei ala balabayis mitzvah sheyaniach oisim lechel mima she'nesim bei. So there's a mitzvah that the balabayis has to let them eat. There's nachamo pelim that are doing work with something that grows from the ground, and another tonight is adayin le nigmar malachte. And also v'yom asayim gemiras hamalacha. So then the din is that the balabayas has to let them eat. Shenamar kisavi bekerem riyacha, and kisavi becomes riyacha, and it says over there that they're allowed to eat. Piashmul lamdu she'ein hakasim medaber ela b'sacher. That the pasuk is talking about someone that's working in someone's kerem or someone's kama. Because v'chil ilu le'sachrei mihita le'sheyavi bekerem riyehu bekama shalei midaite. In other words, this first of all is Piyashmol Lamdu, but also the Seichel says what's shot in the pasuk is someone that's Savi the Kerem Riyacha, Savi in Kamas Riyacha. If he's not a hired worker, what gives him the right to go into someone's Kerem or someone's Kamash Lemidaite? Elakach Weimiki, Savi Brishus Bailam Laveda, you're coming Brishus Bailam Laveda, so the din is Techel, so you're allowed to eat. So this is the pasuk that tells us that Benigeya a dover hamechuber lekarka you're allowed to eat. Now, babin hoise betolish leise b'mechuber. What nafkamin is lepeil between someone that's working on something that's tolish, someone that's working mechuber. Shahoise betolish, when a person is working on something that's giduli minoras, but right now it's tolish, is eichel bedover shalei nigru malachte. So he can eat something which is lei nigru malachte, like we said before. However, umishitegomer malachte, once it's tegomer malachte, asul leilechel, he's not allowed to eat anymore. Once it's tegomer malachte, he's not allowed to eat anymore. However, when a person is b'mechuber kagain boitzer v'koitzer, is fakert einei oichel elek sheyigmar avidase. So in other words, he only eats when he finishes his work. The Ram doesn't titrate so clearly earlier. The ikka is that a hoise betolish oichel bedavar shalid nigmar malachte while he's working. And when he finishes working, the pashtus means mishdigomer malachte, when he finishes working, not when the item is nigmar malachte. Not sure, because before the Rambam said also that it has to be that it's le nigmar malachte. But I'll call upon him mishdigomer malachte, once he finishes working, is asur lelechem. However, v'hoise b'mechuber k'gein beitzer v'keitzer is fakert einei eichel elek sheigmar avidosi. He has to only eat when he finishes his work. Again, sheyivtzer, let's say he's cutting the grapes, and v'yitin besal, and he puts it into the basket. Achi malenu, he fills up the basket. V'yinapitz asal lemokim acher, and he throws out the basket to a place. And then v'yachzer v'yivtzer v'yimalenu. So his job is to go ahead and harvest the grapes. Fills up a basket. He takes this basket and brings it somewhere to a place where he piles it up. And then he spills it out into that pile, and then he goes back and refills the basket. While he's filling up the basket, and he's in the middle of cutting for the balabais, he's not allowed to eat Only after the sal was filled up, that's when he's allowed to eat. Aval and l'chura at that point in time, the sal is filled up, that's when he's allowed to eat. Now when he's going now and taking from, let's say he didn't fill up the basket yet. So he's going, let's say, from one row to another row in order to fill up the basket. So at that point in time, the pashtus he's not allowed to eat. Al derazeh, when he's, let's say, returning from after he spilled out the basket, and now he's returning back to go ahead and refill the basket. So again, he's not gomer malacha. Right now, he has to start his work. So l'chura at this point in time, he shouldn't be eating. So when should he be eating? He should be eating after he filled up his basket, before he goes any weiter. Now l'chura, if the din is going to be like that, so lepel, what's going to happen is that a person is going to middle working, and then he's going to stop and he's going to start eating. So Chazal instituted that even though be'amis meikra the din, that really what should happen, chura pitera. But nevertheless, in order so the workers shouldn't be stopping in the middle of the day and starting to eat. So therefore, they instituted that they should eat while they're walking. When they go from one row to another row, even though Mikra the din of a pashta, that's the middle of their work. But they should be eating and also when on their way back from the gas where they spilled out the grapes, they brought the grapes to the gas, to the press, and they're on their way back from the press, so there they could pick off some of the grapes on the way in order to eat. In order for them not to be bottled b'malacha, they're eating while they're working. What do you mean when they're working? When they're walking and they're not doing anything, so at that point in time, that's when they should be doing their work. So that's this din. The din is anachmal. So when a person is doing bitolush, so he's allowed to go ahead and eat while he's doing the work. And once he finishes his work, at that point in time, he's not allowed to eat. Masha'inkin, when he's working the mechuber, is fakert. While he's doing the work, he's not allowed to eat. And only when he finishes his work, that's when he's allowed to eat. Me'ikr the dinner, really, he should be eating after he fills up the sal. But therefore, Chazal instituted that he should be eating while he's going from one row to the other row in order to fill up the sal, or on his way back from the gas. When the Rambam said before that when a person's oiseh betolush is mishitigomer melachti osir lelecha, the pashta pshat mitigomer melachti means that the malacha of this item was gomer. But it also, that's really goes together with that he finished his work. I mean, Behemshel, the Rambam speaks about gomer avidose. Before he said gomer melachti. But l'chura, that's the pshat. When a person's oiseh betolush, so he's oichel bedavar shalinigmer melachti while he's working. Once the malacha of this item was to gomer, and memela, he also is not working anymore. So then it's asur lelechel. Masha'inkin, when a person is oiseh b'mechuber, so while he's working, he's not allowed to be toilish. He's only supposed to be toilish really when he fills up the salt. But misad hashav aveda l'maylim, Chazal instituted that he should be working, that he should be eating on his way from one oyman to the other oyman, even though Vice says meikra the dinner, that would also be a time that he shouldn't be eating, because lepel he's like in the middle of work. But nevertheless, because since he's not doing anything anyways, because he's just walking, so therefore he's not taking away from malachti shabalabayis. Now there is that when he's on his way back from the gas, so l'chur again, he's on his way back from the gas, and at that point in time he's going to prepare himself to work. So l'chur he didn't finish work, but nevertheless, Chazal instituted at that point in time he should be able to eat in order he shouldn't be mavatal malachti shabalabayis. Halacha Gimel, Hamavatal Mimalachti V'achal, which means he was in the middle of cutting the grapes, and he stopped, and he went ahead and ate. Eisha Achal Shlei B'Shaz Gmar Malacha. It wasn't Shaz Gmar Malacha. It was maybe before he started cutting the grapes, and it was before he started cutting grapes. There's a mitzvah that he's in the middle of cutting, and he stopped. And there's a mitzvah that he even didn't start yet. And it wasn't Shlei B'Shaz Gmar Malacha, like we were saying before. That was the Chazal instituted, that he could go on his way back from the gas. But that would be Shalei b'shaz gmar malacha is areza aver b'leisasa. Shenamar v'chermesh lisonif. The pasuk says you shouldn't pick up a sickle, a knife over the kamas riyacha. Is piyashmul lamdu shekol zman shu oisik b'ktzira, while he's involved in cutting the items of the balabayas le'yonif chermesh lachilasi v'chein kol keitz b'zeh. So now we learn out the lav of a chermesh lisonif. Means don't pick up a chermesh while you're doing work for the balabayas. That's the number one. V'chein poil shahilich biyodei mimasha asa. So there's a din that he's allowed to eat while he's working. He's allowed to eat. Either when he's talking about betolush, it's while he's working, and when he's doing b'mechuber is when he finishes working. But either way, there's a heter to eat, but he's not allowed to take it. You're not allowed to take any of the food with you. Is v'chein poil shahilich biyodei mimasha asa. Eshalokach yesra lachilosei. And v'nosan lacherim over there, he picked up some food and he said, you eat it. He could have eaten it, but he's giving someone else to eat. V'nosan lacherim is eva blesses shemar v'elkel yicholei sitin. His right is only to eat. Masha'inkin, to give it to someone else or to take it with him, he doesn't have a right. So Nachamal, he doesn't have a right to start eating while he's in the middle of the work, or before, not while he's finishing the work. That's been again when he's doing b'mechuber. And then there's another din that he's not allowed to give it to someone else, and he's not allowed to take it with him. And however, and if he does do that, is eva belesis shnema ve'alkel yicholei sitin. Ve'in leiken al shnei lav meilu shem ochel lehele chayiv l'shalom. Because since he's chayiv l'shalom, so meil it's a lav again the nitn l'tashlumen, and for a lav and nitn tashlumen, so there's no malchus. Now, we mentioned before with this the deal on whether or not you're chayiv on lisigzel. You're chayiv on lisigzel. We showed the Rambam in Hilchas Malachim, when the Rambam was mechadish that by goy there's a iser lisigzel, masha'enkin by yid not. But there's a deal there. The Ram in Ram Frankel in the Mafteach over there, he brings various different achreinim. The Smeh speaks about it in Smeh, the Prisha, and Aldaz in Mechaschino talks about it, and others. The Rit Perlo talks about it. There's a whole list of different achreinim that discuss this din, whether or not when a person is over al kel yichalisil sitain, or if a person is over the chemesh lisonif, whether or not he's also chayiv on lisigzim. Halacha dalet hachoylev, someone that milks a cow, or v'hamechabetz, a mechabetz like he's making either cheese or cream, v'hamegabin, making like hard cheese. All of these things eino echel because mipnei she'eino geduli karka. This whole din of a poil being allowed to eat is only something that grows from the ground. Now, hamenachish b'ptzolim ubishumim, someone that takes out, in other words, he's taking out the weeds or he's taking out the small onions in order for the large onions to grow better. Aval pi shetoilish ktanim, he's taking out the small onions or the small garlic. Is aval pi shetoilish ktanim b'nagdelim, so l'churi he's taking off the small ones from the big ones. So l'churi is being toilish v'chein kol kiyetz b'zeh. So it's geduli karka. Is einei echel mipnei she'ein maseim gmar melacha, because what they're doing is only helping the larger onions. Because when a person cuts, harvesting, so the harvesting is a gmar melacha. Now that's what it needs. The grapes need to be harvested. Masha'inkin, when a person is just taking out the small onions from the big onions, so this is not really the gmar melacha. This is only helping the large onions to become better. So even someone that's doing that is actually doing work with the onions, but nevertheless, since it's not gmar melacha, he's not entitled to eat. Someone that's just a watchman of a garden or an orchard, like various different gourds or different pumpkins, they have no right to eat because they're not working with these items. In other words, when a person is working with something and their work is gemar malachton, so for example, they're harvesting, so that's the gemar malachton, so then they have a right to eat. And they eat only after they finish their work. Masha'in came, when a person is watching an item, or a person is just watching an item, or even a person is working with the item, but it's not the gemar malachton, he's picking out the small onions from the large onions, so then he's not entitled to eat. Halacha hey, haboidel betmarim begregers. A person has tmarim begregers which are all stuck together, and he's separating them. In other words, he has the tmarim, they were already cut, they were already pushed together, and he's separating them. Either dates or figs is eina echel mipnei shenigmar malachton l'maiser. Because they were already nigmar malachton l'maiser, they were made into a cakes, and therefore they were nigmar malachton, and therefore the whole din of doing someone going ahead and working on something that's giduli karka is only if it's lay nigmar malachton l'maiser. Now ha'oisa b'chitim u'kiyetze b'em achar she'iser, he already was mafresh meiser, and now he's working. He's hired someone to work on his wheat. Kigei shesachra and love or tzreides. His work is to go ahead and pick out the stones from the wheat, from the kernels of wheat, Elenapa isam, or to sift them through, elitchin, or to grind them, is harei luechlin. Why? L'chura they were already nigmer malachtim. There was already meiser, but shadayin le nigmer malachtim lechala. That's also called le nigmer malachtim, because since there's another process in wheat which you're going to make from it challah, and then you're going to be mechoyev b'challah. So therefore, it's considered le nigmer malachtim lechala. So when a person deals with figs or with dates which were already nigmer malachton, and now he's just working with them, so then he doesn't eat. And the reason is because it's nigmer malachton. When a person is working with kernels of wheat, so even though l'chur they were also nigmer and there was also trumas and meiser taken already, but since there's still going to be a process of taking challah, so therefore they go into the category of le nigmer malachton, and therefore he's entitled to eat. Aval halosh, someone that goes ahead and kneads the dough, or Ramakativ is like puts the water over the dough, and he bakes. Is all of these things because once it's dough, so there's already a chi of challah. So only something that's le nigmer malachta, either le nigmer lemaiser, or even if it was nigmer lemaiser, but if it was le nigmer lechallah, is also entitled to eat. But if it's something that was already nigmer, so then he's not entitled to eat. That is halacha. Nisparsu igulov, v'nispatchu chavyesov, or v'nischatchu diluov. Now, as a person had already the igulim of, let's say, dates that were put together as cakes, or he had barrels of wine that were already closed, they were closed up, and everything was already ready, or the dluim were already piled up, and therefore they were already nigmer malachta. And Lepel, something happened, and as a result of that, now they have to redo things. The barrels of wine were opened, or the gulim fell apart. So they were already at one point nigmer malachtim. Now he's hiring people to take care of it. Now, when he hired them, the pashtus advarim was that they weren't late nigmer malachtim. So that person was assuming that he'll have a right to eat. Aliba de emes, it was nigmer malachtim. So the din is again, Sparshu igulav v'nispatchu chayesav v'nischatchu diluv v'socher lasis bam. So the din is harei lo yechlim. Why? Shaharei nigmer malachtam, because lepel they were nigmer malachtam v'nikfu lemaiser v'harei zetevel. However, v'imlei hidion, if he didn't notify them, so they were under the impression that they will be allowed to eat. So then there's ma'aser, so he has to be mafresh meiser from these things, or machilam will let them eat. In other words, since they expected to be able to eat, you see, even though Ali B'Damas, they're not allowed to eat because Lepel was already Nigmar Malachton. But Lepel, it's his obligation, it's a dinimominus to go ahead and be Ma'aser and let them eat. No halacha. Eina pelim echlum b'shel hegdish. This din that a peil is allowed to eat, bekerem riyacha, bekormas riyacha, that's bar riyacha. Shnember bekerem riyacha. Masha'inkin, if it's not kerem riyacha, so then they're not allowed to eat. Now, Sachar Pelim Lasis Benetter Vaishale, and something that's growing in the fourth year, is Harela Leyechla, because Netter Avai, they have no right to eat. However, V'im Lehidion, if he didn't notify them that it's Netter Avai, so again, they came down working on the impression that they're going to have a right to eat, and Lepel they can't eat because Lepel is Netter Avai, so what he has to do is Peido Machilon, just like we learned before, that he has to give Meiser and Machilon, so over here also, by the Netter Avai, he has to be Peido or Machilon. Halacha ches, hakoitzer, someone that cuts from the field, of hadosh, and he threshes, v'hazera, and he winnows, v'haberer, and he picks out the impurities. V'hamoisek is when he cuts zesim, olives, or v'haboitzer, which is cutting grapes. V'haderech, and he's quetching out the grapes. V'chol kiyetzim b'mlachas elu. These are all malachas which are being done, which something that's gedulim in akarka, either by koitzer, and by Moisek and Boitzer it was mechubel lekarka, and Dosh, Zeir and Beir it was not mechubel lekarka, was tolish. By all these things, Harei Elu Oichlu Menatera. They have a right to eat Menatera because Lepel, as we learned before, Sai, when you're working with something that's mechubel lekarka, there's dinim of kisavi lekamas liyacha. Sai, you're coming to something which is tolish menakarka. All of them have a din that they have a right to eat Menatera, even though there's a difference, as we mentioned, that by Tolish you can eat b'shas Aveda, Masha'enki by Mechuber, it's only when you finish the Aveda. Now, halach test, Shemri Gites, Va'aremes, V'chol Dover HaTolish Menat Karka, Shadayin lenigmar malachnu lemaiser. So there are people that are watching. They're watching either the gas, the place where they've pressed the olives and the grapes, or v'haremis and piles v'choldover atolish min hakarka, which adayin lenigmar malachtam lemaiser. So be'etzem, when you work with these items, you are entitled to eat. But lepel, these people aren't working with these items. These people are only shemrim. So the din is oichlin mihilchis medina. They eat mihilchis medina. Knows mitzad the seder advar mihilchis medina. Knows not mitzad the din teira. Mitzad hilchis ad medina of the takona that they're allowed to eat. Shashemer ain't a keisa maisa. He's not keisa maisa. So therefore, if it's instituted that he should eat, you're allowed to eat. Masha'ei came be'etzem and ateri. He has no right to eat, like we learned before. Avalim osa be'ever me'ivarav ben biyada ben beraglav afilu b'ksefei. Says then is if he's doing something with his hands, with his legs, with some part of his body, he's actually doing something, so then he has a right to be oichel minatera. Masha'enkin, if he's just watching it, so then he's only allowed to eat mihilchas medina. Lepel over here it says that you oichel kehilchas medina. Now over here we're talking because you're being a shemer on tolush. Before we learned benegiyah someone that's a shemer a pardes, so he's shemer b'mechuber. So over there's no hilchas medina there's no minig that he should be able to eat. Mashenkan over here advice says there was a minig that he should be able to eat. So mitzad the minig that he should be able to eat, he's allowed to eat. Mashenkan mitzad minatera be'etzem he shouldn't be allowed to eat. Halacha yud. Hoya oisa b'teinim, a person that was working b'teinim, leichel ba'novim. So that doesn't give him a right to eat ba'novim, or ba'novim. If he's working on a novim, leichel b'teinim. Shnemer b'kerem, v'chalt anovim. When he's working in the kerem, he has a right to eat on novim. Now v'oisa b'gefen, so he's working on this vine, is eine echel begefen acher, so he has no right to eat from another vine. And v'leyochel anovim v'dover acher, he shouldn't eat grapes with something else which will make it nicer to eat the grapes. In other words, he could eat grapes, but he can't go ahead and eat grapes and mix it with other things to make it easier, to make it geschmacker to eat the grapes. And also v'leichel bepas, v'lei b'melech, in other words, things that he's eating, he shouldn't eat with bread or with salt, because lepel, the right was only to eat the item as is. But the pashtus, when he's going to start adding other things, he's going to be eating more. But the Torah, the heter of the Torah that he should eat only that he's allowed to eat the item as is. But to go ahead and take this item and enhance the item to make it more appetizing, that he has no right. Now, if he made up with the balabais what he's going to eat, knows be'etzem and he's allowed to eat whatever he eats. That's we'll learn b'hamsha. He's allowed to eat as much as he's allowed to eat. He's not allowed to eat achil gasa, but he's allowed to eat. But there's a mitzvah, a person is allowed to be mavater and say, I'm not going to eat. Or he could make up with the balabais how much I'm going to eat. In other words, since it's a davar shebemomon, so even though Menateri he has a right to eat, but he can make up with the balabais how much he's going to eat. Them kotzes and balabais al shir mashiyechel, which means he was mavater, and he made up with the balabais how much he's going to eat. So then, that amount that he made up with the balabais is oichalese bein b'mela bein b'pas bechin davar sheyirtza, because since ultimately he's already not eating mitzad this din that he's allowed to eat. Now he's eating because of what he made up with the balabais. So legabi that there's no din that he can't eat it with something else. Now there's another din, osir lepel lomutz ba'novim. In other words, to go ahead and just suck out the juice of the grape and the rest of the grape to throw away. Osir lepel lomutz ba'novim, shnama v'chalta anovim. You have to eat the anovim. And also, he's allowed to pick wheat, so he's going to have his wife or children go ahead and like roasting the kernels for him. So male is going to be geschmacker to eat, that he's also not allowed to. You're allowed to eat the grapes as they are. You can't mix it with something else. You can't eat it with pasta, with other things. And you also can't have your wife and children going ahead and roasting the grains for you. Now, a person's allowed to eat, but there's a musik called an achila gasa. Achila gasa means after he's already satiated, he's already full with the food, he's now just like stuffing the food into him. He's not really having a tainug of eating. It's not really even shmei achila. So he's now allowed to eat this food, achila gasa, shnei mekanafshe chasavecha. He's allowed to eat kanafshe sevecha to be satiated, but he's not allowed to stuff himself with food after he's already fully full. If there's better places, not such good places, So he could hold himself back from eating from the places that are not so good in order to be hungry. When he comes to that place, he'll be able to eat yofis. Afilu b'dinner, he could eat kishes, which is a certain type of vegetable, even with the worth of a dinner, or v'kiseves, and a date, afilu b'dinner, afal pisha, sachri b'mor kesef. Whereas even though the amount that he's getting paid is only a mor kesef, and here he's eating an enormous amount of the food that he's eating, way more than his salary, but nevertheless, he's allowed to shnamar, kinafshecha sivecha. So technically, once he's working, he's allowed to eat as much as his hunger wants him to eat. Aval malamdin asa'adam, but a person is taught, should be taught, shaliyeh rafson, he shouldn't act like a very hungry person. Memela v'yeh seisim is hapesah b'fanav, because if the boss will see how much he's eating, he won't hire him again. So therefore, Memela, it's not advisable for him to do this. But Lepil, technically, if he goes ahead and works, so he's allowed to, there's no hagbala how much he's allowed to eat, even if he's eating much more than his original salary. Now, Hoya Mishamer Arbe Chomesh Aremis, he was watching 4 or 5 piles. We said before that even though he's a Mishamer, so Mitzad Hilchas Medina, he's allowed to eat, but nevertheless, we should eat from each one a little bit. But Lepil, he shouldn't go ahead and eat from one. Now that's the din. So the din is a person is allowed to eat from the items that he's working on. We're talking about, let's say, if it's tolush, he's working on something that's tolush, he's allowed to eat from it. Now when a person's working on grapes, and the grapes are being made into wine, so he's allowed to eat grapes because he's working on the grapes. The question is, when is he allowed to start drinking the wine? When does it have a din of wine? They didn't go the shesi ve'erev begas. In other words, they went just in one direction and they didn't go the cross direction. So then, as oichel manovim, they're still allowed to eat grapes. They're not allowed to drink wine. Because at this point in time, since they didn't yet go shesi ve'erev, so even though there's some wine being squeezed out from the grapes, but that's not called yet wine, and therefore it's considered that you're still working with the grapes. And therefore, you're only allowed to eat grapes. However, when you start walking it both ways, it's side in the length and side in the width, you go shesi ve'erev. So then the grape, the juice that's coming out of the wine already, out of the grapes as a din of wine. So then it's yeshlum lechel min hanovim. They could eat the grapes because they're still working on the grapes, and also and to drink the wine. Because they're eating side the anovim side the wine. Halacha Yid Gimel. Peil she'amar tnu li ishti ubona in masha ani oichel. What I'm supposed to eat, I'm not going to eat anything. Give it to my wife and children. She'amar hareini neisi ma'at mizeh shenotalti lechel. The little bit that I took to eat, I want to give li ishti ubona in shemli. Sheli zichsa teira elul peil atzmi. The Torah gave the peil the right to eat. But the peil has no right to give even the amount that he was about to take for himself to eat, to give it away li ishti ubonov. Afilu nazir sheyaisa b'anovim, so he can't eat the anovim. And Va'arman is saying, I can't eat the anovim. Tzunul ishti ubana gives the anovim that I would have eaten if I would have been allowed to eat. Give it to my wife and children, ain't shameful. The Torah permitted him to eat. The Torah didn't permit him to take. Now, Peil sheyaisa hu ishti ubana v'avodov. The histim balabai. I mean, this is negay also. This is the shaila b'negay. A person is eating in someone's house. So, and he's allowed to eat. The person is being served. Now, what happens if you take a portion of the food that the person is serving you, and you go ahead and you mekadosh isha with it? So that he gave it to you in order to eat. He didn't give it to you that it's yours. He gave it to you. You have a right to eat it. But lepel, it's not yours. You can't go ahead and take it. And memela, so this, if you be mekadosh isha, the pasha is not mekudeshes. Al that is over here. The Torah is telling you you're allowed to eat. The Torah is letting you to eat. The Torah is not saying this is yours. The Torah is saying you're allowed to eat it. So you're not eating it. You say, well, I'm not eating it, so let me give it to my wife and children. I'm a nazir, I can't eat it, so let me give it to my wife and children. So we say, no. The Torah never gave it to you. The Torah only permitted you to eat. That's the avonas hadvar. Poil shoyoisahu v'ishti ubana v'avodav. And lepel, as we said before, you can make it tonight that you're not going to eat, because at night should be moment, so you could forfeit your right to eat. V'histam avalabai sholei yechlu v'mashem mesim. That him and his wife and his children and avodim, they're not going to eat. Avodim is talking about evet knaini. So the din is if you make such a t'nai, so you have no right to eat. Then you can make such a t'nai and make up that they're not going to eat is big deal. You are meichel, your wife was meichel, your banim agdelim were meichel. So you made up this price. We're going to go ahead and we're going to work, and that person only wants to hire a worker that's not going to eat. So we made up they're not going to eat. But if some of the workers were ktanim, you can go ahead and say that your little son, which is working in the field for the balabais, is not going to eat. Why? Because these children aren't eating mishalavim, ein mishaladineim, ela mishal shemaim. It's the Eibishter giving them the food. So you have no balabatishkeit to be able to give up that food which they have a right to eat, that the Eibishter is giving them. The food that you're getting, you have a right to be mevater on. The food that your wife is getting, she has a right to be mevater on. Masha'inki, the food that the little children are getting, you have no right to be mevater, and they're not ban mechila, so they have a right to eat.